Hi everyone, my name is Adam, and this is Chimera Studio. In this video, we're going to go extremely deep into the topic of creating leather armor in ZBrush. This is not a short tutorial, and it's not meant to be consumed quickly. The purpose of this video is to slow down, understand the material, understand the tools, and most importantly, understand the decision-making process behind every step. Leather armor is one of those subjects where fundamentals matter more than fancy techniques, and where a strong understanding can completely change the quality of your work. We'll start from absolute basics and gradually move toward more complex ideas. Even if you already know ZBrush well, I encourage you to listen to the reasoning behind each step, because sculpting believable materials is as much about mindset as it is about technical skill. The first thing we need to talk about is leather itself. Leather is a natural material, and even when it's processed, hardened, dyed, or reinforced, it still behaves very differently from metal, cloth, or plastic. Leather bends, but it resists. It stretches, but only slightly. It compresses under pressure, and over time it smooths out rather than breaking apart. If you try to sculpt leather the same way you would sculpt fabric or steel, the result will almost always feel wrong, even if you can't immediately explain why. Leather armor is also a constructed object. It is made from many individual pieces that are cut, shaped, stitched, strapped, and layered together. This means that every single plate, strap, and panel should have a reason to exist. When you sculpt leather armor, you are not just sculpting shapes, you are sculpting craftsmanship. You're telling a story about how this armor was made, who made it, and how it has been used. Because of this, reference gathering is absolutely essential. Before doing any sculpting, you should spend time looking at real leather armor, historical references, modern leather equipment, belts, bags, jackets, and also fantasy interpretations from games and films. When you look at references, don't just look at surface detail. Look at construction. Look at seams. Look at overlaps. Look at where the leather is pulled tight and where it's allowed to hang loose. Look at which areas are reinforced and which areas are flexible. Once you start sculpting, keep your references visible. Don't rely on memory. If you feel stuck or unsure, the solution is almost always in the reference. When it comes to the base mesh, simplicity is key. For leather armor, I usually start with a very simple torso mesh. I remove anything that's not relevant, such as arms, legs, or the head. This is not about optimization, it's about focus. The fewer distractions you have, the easier it is to make good decisions. At this stage, the base mesh only needs to be clean and evenly distributed enough to support sculpting. It does not need high resolution yet. The blockout phase is the most important part of the entire process. This is where the armor is designed. Everything that comes later is just refinement. During the blockout, you should completely ignore surface detail. No leather grain, no stitching, no scratches, only large, clear shapes, primary forms. Using brushes like clay strips, clay buildup, and move, start defining the main armor pieces. Think in layers from the very beginning. Leather armor almost never sits flush against the body as one continuous shell. There are overlapping plates, reinforced areas, and gaps that allow movement. Even if the design is stylized or fantasy-based, it should still follow some internal logic. At this stage, your sculpt will look rough, uneven, and unfinished. That's not only normal, it's correct. If your blockout already looks polished, you're probably focusing on the wrong things. The goal here is readability. If you zoom out, you should be able to clearly understand what the armor is, how it's structured, and where the main components are. Once the blockout feels solid, the next step is to break the armor into individual pieces. Leather armor works best when each plate or panel exists as its own object, or at least as its own polygroup. This allows for proper thickness, clean overlaps, and realistic interaction between parts. There are many ways to do this in ZBrush. You can use masking and extraction, polygroups, mesh duplication, or a combination of these. A common approach is to duplicate the blockout mesh, mask out the area of a specific armor plate, assign it to its own polygroup, and then isolate it. By deleting hidden geometry, you can turn that plate into a standalone piece. This process may feel repetitive, but it's crucial for realism. While separating pieces, always think about construction. Ask yourself how this piece would be attached. Would it be stitched? Would it be strapped? Would it be riveted? Even if you don't sculpt all of these elements yet, the underlying logic should guide the shape. Thickness is one of the most important aspects of leather armor. Without thickness, leather looks fake. It looks like paper or plastic. Real leather has mass. It occupies space. Thickness should be visible especially along edges, overlaps, and cut lines. You can add thickness in several ways: extracting from a mask, using panel loops, inflating geometry, or using dynamic subdivision with creases. There is no single correct method. What matters is that the thickness feels believable. Avoid perfectly uniform thickness. Real leather varies slightly, especially if it's handmade or worn. Edges deserve special attention. Leather edges should never be razor sharp. They are rounded, compressed, and softened over time. Even freshly cut leather has a slight softness to it. I often use the smooth brush lightly along edges, sometimes combined with pinch to maintain structure without making the edge sharp. Once the primary forms and thickness are established, we move into secondary forms. This is where folds, compression, and tension come into play. Leather folds differently than cloth. It doesn't create flowing waves. Instead, it creates sharper, more directional creases, especially near areas of stress. Focus on areas where the armor is pulled tight, such as strap connections, buckles, and joints. Use brushes like Dam Standard or Dam Smooth to carve in fold directions. After carving, soften the folds slightly so they feel organic rather than carved into stone. Every fold should have a reason. Random folds will instantly break realism. Directionality is critical here. Leather responds to force. If a strap pulls downward, the folds should reflect that downward force. If the armor bends at the waist, the folds should radiate from that area. Always imagine the armor being worn and moving with a body. As you refine the sculpt, start thinking about mid-level wear and deformation. Leather changes over time. Some areas stretch slightly, others compress. And some areas become smoother from repeated contact. Use the move brush very subtly to introduce these changes. Avoid symmetry. Even small asymmetries make the armor feel more believable and handmade. Only after all of this is working should you start thinking about surface detail. Leather grain is subtle. This is where many sculpts are ruined by overdetailing. If the grain is clearly visible, it's too strong. The purpose of surface detail is not to draw attention, but to break up light and reflections. Surface noise is a powerful tool here, especially when used at very low intensity. You can also use soft alphas, but always build up slowly. Apply noise, then smooth it slightly. Check your sculpt at normal viewing distance, not just zoomed in. Edge wear is another important aspect. Leather does not chip or crack like metal. Instead, edges become rounded and compressed. Areas that rub against other pieces or the body will appear smoother over time. This effect is achieved mostly by removing detail rather than adding it. Strategic smoothing is often more effective than sculpting damage. Seams and stitching tell the story of how the armor was made. You don't need to sculpt every stitch. Often, just implying seams with shallow lines is enough. If you choose to use stitch alphas, do so sparingly. Too much stitching quickly becomes visual noise and distracts from the overall form. As you approach later stages, introduce subtle imperfections. Uneven folds, slight dents, small thickness variations. These should never be obvious. The goal is for the viewer to feel realism, not to consciously notice details. Throughout the entire process, zoom out often. Check the silhouette. Check readability. Check how the armor reads as a whole. If something feels wrong, the issue is almost always in the primary or secondary forms, not the surface detail. Fix the big problems first. Leather armor sculpting is not about using every brush ZBrush has to offer. It's about restraint, observation, and understanding material behavior. The more you respect the fundamentals, the less you'll need to rely on tricks. Every piece you sculpt will teach you something new. Over time, you'll start to feel when something is wrong before you can explain it, and that instinct comes directly from studying real materials and practicing intentionally. These are the foundations. Everything I'm about to show you in this series is built on fundamentals, not tricks, not shortcuts, and not style-first decisions. If you understand these basics properly, you'll be able to create leather armor in any style: realistic, stylized, grimdark, fantasy, or something entirely your own. And if you skip these steps, no amount of surface detail or fancy brushes will save the sculpt later. This entire video series is about showing you how to build leather armor correctly, from the ground up. Not just how to press buttons in ZBrush, but how to think while you're sculpting. Because the quality of your work is not defined by how much detail you add, but by the decisions you make before adding any detail at all. I want you to pay close attention, especially in the early parts of this series, because this is where the fundamentals live. These are the steps most people rush through, underestimate, or skip entirely. And those same steps are usually the reason their sculpts feel off, even if they can't explain why. In the very first video of this series, the one you're watching right now, we are focusing exclusively on the blockout, the base silhouette, and the creation of the shoulder pads. No fine detail, no leather grain, no stitching, just structure, proportion, and logic. If these elements are wrong, everything that comes after will be wrong as well. Blockout is not preparation. Blockout is the sculpt. When you block out leather armor, you are making the most important decisions you will make during the entire process. You are deciding how the armor is constructed, how it sits on the body, how it overlaps, how it moves, and how it reads from a distance. This is where design happens. Everything later is refinement. Leather armor must always be approached as a constructed object. It is not a smooth shell wrapped around a body. It is a system of plates, panels, straps, and reinforcements, all working together. Even in fantasy designs, this logic should exist internally. The viewer might not consciously analyze it, but they will feel when it's missing. That's why in this first video, we start with a very simple base, usually just a torso. No arms, no legs, no head. Not because those things aren't important, but because they distract from what we're trying to learn. At this stage, anatomy is not the focus. Armor construction is. The moment you open ZBrush, your first instinct should not be to subdivide. It should not be to add detail. It should be to ask questions. What kind of leather armor is this? Is it heavy or light? Is it ceremonial or practical? Is it worn by a soldier, a knight, a hunter, or something else entirely? These questions inform shape, not detail. In the blockout phase, everything is about primary forms. Large shapes, clear volumes, strong silhouettes. If you zoom out and the armor does not read clearly, you are not ready to move forward. This is one of the hardest lessons for beginners to accept because it feels slow. But speed without clarity leads nowhere. Leather armor lives and dies by its silhouette. From far away, you should already understand what kind of armor this is, how bulky it is, and how it protects the body. The silhouette should show overlaps, layers, and weight distribution. Flat silhouettes mean flat designs. As you block out the armor, you should already be thinking in layers. Which parts sit on top of others? Which areas are reinforced? Which parts are flexible? Leather allows movement, but armor restricts it. Your blockout should reflect that balance. At this stage, the sculpt should look rough, uneven, even ugly. That's not a problem. That's a sign you're doing it correctly. Polish at this stage is not only unnecessary, it's harmful. It locks you into decisions too early. Once the main forms are readable, the next fundamental step is separation. Leather armor should almost never be a single continuous mesh. Each plate or panel should exist as its own element, or at least as its own logical unit. This is critical for thickness, for edge behavior, and for realism. In this first video, I show how to approach this separation cleanly, using simple workflows that don't rely on complicated tools. Masking, polygroups, duplication, and deletion. These are not advanced techniques, but they are powerful when used intentionally. Every time you separate a piece, you should ask yourself how it is held in place. Is it stitched? Is it strapped? Is it layered under something else? Even if you don't sculpt those elements yet, the form should suggest them. Thickness is introduced early, not late. Leather without thickness is not leather, it's paper. Thickness gives weight. Thickness gives credibility. But thickness should never be perfectly uniform. Real leather varies. Handmade armor varies even more. Edges are part of this fundamental understanding. Leather edges are not sharp. They are compressed, rounded, and softened over time. In this series, I'll repeatedly show how important it is to avoid razor-sharp edges, even at the blockout level. Edge quality defines material. Once the torso armor is blocked out and separated, we move into one of the most misunderstood parts of armor design: shoulder pads. Shoulder pads are not decorative elements added at the end. They are structural components that heavily influence silhouette and character. In the first video, I focus on shoulder pads specifically because they force you to think in 3 dimensions. They sit away from the body. They overlap other armor pieces. They interact with movement. There are many ways to create shoulder pads in ZBrush, and throughout this series I'll show multiple approaches. But in the beginning, we focus on simple, readable construction, often starting from a plane, extruding it, shaping it, and building volume gradually. This method teaches control and intentionality. Shoulder pads should never feel glued onto the body. They need space. They need thickness. They need a clear relationship to the torso armor. Are they strapped on? Are they resting on underlying padding? Are they asymmetrical? These questions affect shape long before detail. In the first video, I deliberately keep shoulder pads simple. Not because simple is the goal, but because clarity is. If you can make a simple shoulder pad look believable, you can make a complex one work later. Throughout this series, I want you to focus less on copying shapes and more on understanding reasoning. Why a form is pushed outward. Why another is flattened. Why something overlaps instead of merging smoothly. These decisions are what separate sculptors from people who just use sculpting software. This series is designed so that each video builds on the previous one. If you skip the fundamentals, later videos will not help you. Surface detail means nothing if the structure underneath is weak. Leather grain will not fix a bad silhouette. Stitching will not fix illogical construction. That's why I emphasize so strongly that this first video, the blockout, base silhouette, and shoulder pads, is the most important one in the entire series. Everything else grows from here. As we move forward in later episodes, we'll cover secondary forms, folds, compression, leather behavior under tension, surface detail, seams, stitching, wear, aging, and stylistic variation. But none of that matters unless the fundamentals are solid. I want you to slow down, watch carefully, pause the video, look at the shapes, look at what changes when something is moved just slightly. This is not about memorizing steps, it's about training your eye. If you understand these foundations, you will not be locked into one workflow. You'll be able to adapt. You'll be able to problem solve. You'll be able to design, not just execute. This series exists to give you that foundation. In this video, and in the videos that will follow, I want to give you a clear picture of where this channel is going and what kind of knowledge you can expect to gain from it. What started as ZBrush-focused content is going to expand into a much broader, more complete learning path for anyone who wants to understand not just how to sculpt, but how modern game-ready assets and entire games are actually made. ZBrush will always remain a core pillar of this channel. It is one of the strongest tools available for sculpting, for understanding form, material, and structure, and for developing an artist's eye. But sculpting alone is only one piece of a much larger pipeline. My goal is to show you that pipeline step by step, in a way that is practical, honest, and grounded in real production thinking. In the future, these tutorials will expand into Autodesk Maya, where we'll cover hard surface modeling, clean topology, retopology for games, and efficient workflows that translate well into real-time engines. Maya is not just another modeling tool. It's a bridge between sculpting and functionality. It's where raw artistic shapes are turned into something usable, optimized, and controllable. Understanding Maya means understanding structure, edge flow, deformation, and how models behave once they're no longer static. Alongside Maya, there will be extensive content focused on Substance Painter. Texturing is where models truly come alive, and it's also one of the most misunderstood stages for beginners. Substance Painter is not just about applying smart materials or presets. It's about understanding surface logic, where patterns, storytelling through texture, and consistency across assets. I'll show how to approach texturing not as decoration, but as an extension of modeling and design decisions. From there, the workflow naturally continues into Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine is not just a place where assets are dropped in at the end. It's a powerful creative environment where lighting, materials, animation, logic, and interactivity all come together. On this channel, Unreal Engine will be used not only to showcase finished assets, but to teach the fundamentals of real-time rendering, level assembly, material instances, basic blueprint logic, and performance-aware thinking. If you don't want to miss out on these topics, and if you want to learn as efficiently, as directly, and as clearly as possible, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and drop a like on the video. That support makes a real difference, and it allows this content to grow and become more in-depth over time. Beyond individual tools, a major focus of this channel will be fundamentals. Tools change, interfaces evolve, software versions come and go. Fundamentals do not. Whether you're sculpting in ZBrush, modeling in Maya, texturing in Substance, or working in Unreal, the same core principles apply: form, proportion, readability, structure, and intention. I want you to understand why something works, not just how to replicate it. This is especially important because one of the long-term goals of this channel is to introduce you to the fundamentals of animation and game development as a whole. Animation is often seen as a separate discipline, but in reality, it's deeply connected to modeling and sculpting. Good animation starts with good forms, clean topology, and an understanding of movement and weight. We'll talk about these concepts from the ground up, without assuming prior knowledge. Game development will also be a recurring topic. Not in an abstract or overly academic way, but from the perspective of an indie developer. I want to show how small teams or even solo developers actually build games, make decisions, solve problems, and work within limitations. This includes design thinking, scope management, and understanding what truly matters when you're trying to finish a project instead of endlessly iterating on it. There will be game analyses as well, looking at existing games, breaking them down, and understanding why certain mechanics, visuals, or design choices work the way they do. These analyses are not about criticism for the sake of criticism. They're about learning, about training your eye and your mind to recognize patterns, strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities for improvement. Another important topic that will receive much more attention is trim sheets. Trim sheets are one of the most powerful techniques in game art, yet they're often confusing for beginners. A trim sheet is essentially a reusable texture layout designed to be applied across multiple assets. Instead of creating unique textures for every single object, you create a single texture that contains multiple material strips or details, and then map different parts of your geometry to those areas. This approach saves memory, improves performance, and creates visual consistency across environments. It's widely used in professional game development, especially for environments, props, and architectural elements. On this channel, I'll explain not just how to create trim sheets, but when to use them, why they matter, and how to design assets around them from the very beginning. Understanding trim sheets also changes the way you think about modeling. You stop thinking in terms of unique objects and start thinking in systems. You plan ahead. You design assets that can share materials, that can be modified quickly, and that fit naturally into a larger environment. This mindset is crucial if you want to work efficiently and realistically within a game pipeline. All of these topics, ZBrush, Maya, Substance Painter, Unreal Engine, animation, game development, trim sheets, and analysis, are not isolated subjects. They are connected. The purpose of this channel is to show those connections clearly and honestly, without unnecessary fluff or artificial complexity. I want to be transparent about the process, about the mistakes, the learning curves, and the realities of development. I'll share how an indie developer thinks about building games, how decisions are made, how priorities shift, and how fundamentals guide those decisions when tools and trends change. This channel is for people who want to learn properly. For those who are willing to slow down when necessary, focus on fundamentals, and build real understanding instead of chasing shortcuts. If that sounds like you, then you're in the right place. This is only the beginning of a much larger journey, and the content will continue to grow, evolve, and deepen over time. Thank you for watching my video. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. It's just one click for you, but it helps support my work a lot. I'm Adam, and this is Chimera Studio. See you next time. Take care.